I always tell people that I'm a potter because I hate the term artist because it is so overused. And also Wayne Thiebaud was one of my favorite artists for a long time, and he made the very luscious paintings of desserts, and they were fabulous. He was interviewed on PBS, so I watched it. And the person interviewing him said, well, you know, you were an artist or something. He said, no, I'm not an artist, I'm a painter. I'm a painter. It's up to the critics and the gallerists and museums to decide who a painter is. And so I always call myself a potter. I don't even want to use the word ceramist because it's more elitist. And I always felt that if I was a potter, I had no obligations to do anything. I could do anything I wanted. I didn't have to worry about making, quote, art. So I'm a potter. So this guy comes up to me, I'm in my morning suit, asks me what I do, and I say, well, I'm a potter. And he said, oh, really? I thought you were a banker or something. I thought it was just... When I work, once I make something and fire it and it comes out of the kiln, it's gone. I don't think about it anymore. And so I've been asked how I feel about my work. And so I make the piece. To me, making it is what is important. Creating it is what is important. I fire it and put it up for sale. If it sells, I've made a contract with the person. This is that I've made a contract. I mean, they get the piece, I get the money. They don't tell me how to spend the money. I don't tell them what to do with the piece. What they do with it, I don't care. I mean, they can throw it away for all I care. I'm not attached to the pieces. I'm attached to the process, to creating, to making. And I'm probably the most content in my studio when I'm there making. I don't worry about politics. I don't worry about anything. And I spend the major portion of my life in my studio making stuff. One thing that Archine Fetty, one of my favorite graduate school instructors, told us as to photograph every piece you make and document who has it. And I didn't do either one. So, well, you know what the main thing about graduate school is? I was able to concentrate and do whatever I wanted to do. And I was provided the luxury that the university provided again. They bought all the materials, they provided the space, my living, provided me everything. All I had to do was go there and make what it is I wanted to make. And we were required every year, we would have a ceramic sale. Every graduate student was asked and required to make 100 pieces to sell in the pottery sale. It was a fabulous event, and people would come, they'd come and stand in line to come to the pottery sale. Because again of my decorative, designy background, when we, the teaching assistants, would load the kilns, the undergraduate work, we had this, and Laura Andration was the one that really started this. We'd pick up a piece of undergraduate work that was like horrible, and she'd hold it up and say, does this deserve to live 3,000 years? And we'd say no, and she'd drop it. And then we'd tell this undergraduate, oh, this got broken on the shelf. We were very aware of protecting our ideas and our own sense of design. And so if we saw someone that we thought was influenced or stealing, we would call them out on it. So I didn't want to start, I couldn't have made big things anyway. John Schultz became well known. But the thing about ceramics, which is I think different from painting or quote art, is that you generally have a local reputation more than a national. Even though I showed nationally, my reputation is still here. That's why, to me, the importance of having the collection here in this museum Not only was the museum very important in my whole career here, because I came to Corpus Christi when they were raising the money to build the museum. And because of Richard Colley's connection and Stuart, his son's connections, I got to meet the people that were interested and had the money to buy stuff. And I was involved in the very beginning of the art museum. And when I came here, I was determined that I wasn't going to, I hate to use the term buried, but I didn't want to just be in Corpus Christi. I wanted to show my work, not here, but they had a headdress ball, and we got to make the invitation for the headdress ball, and everyone wore headdresses, and I had bought this Chinese lamp at some swap-around or something, and it had was flat like my work, and it was car shaped like this, and fit right on my head, and then it had a little ruffle around it. So it fit on my head, and the ruffle covered so that's what I wore to the headdress ball. And also at Swap-A-Rama, one time I bought a set of tails. Well, it was a morning suit. And the difference in a morning suit and the tails is, morning suit is, well, it's black, but it has a gray vest and a gray ascot. And so I bought this for $10, and I wore that for years to every formal event, and I wore it to the opening of the art museum. And I remember, and of course, the opening to the art museum was just absolutely amazing. I used to hang out at junk stores, antique shops, resale. I always liked beaded lampshades and things. For whatever reason, I wanted to add those things, but a lot of times people will add things to ceramics and it looks like it's glued on. I wanted to use those things but incorporate it and try to make it an integral part of the piece, which I think I was somewhat successful at. I used to just do stuff. I didn't think about it. Okay, I'm going to make a boot. I went and bought a pair of boots. I made a mold. I don't know whether I'd ever made a mold before. We made a mold of the boot and started and cast boots. And I don't know how many we made for the opening show. The only boot that I have left from that collection is the black and white and silver boot that is in the permanent collection now. So we put them out and sold them. So we made some money from the collection. Consequently, a book has been produced about that collection of boots.
Your collection?
No, the collection of leather boots, which was produced at the same time. Well, Texans are very proud of Texas, so Texas iconography is a selling point. So I don't even know why I did it, but I made a mold. I made a piece that was about the most common height. When I started measuring stuff for shows, the most common height was 13 inches, I think. So I made a vase if you looked at the top of the vase, it was the shape of Texas, and then it was the shape of Texas all the way down, following the contour of Texas. And I made Texas vases, and then I found out that I could cut this vase into sections. So I cut them in like 6 sections, and they became Texas ashtrays by adding a bottom. Adding a bottom, I made a Texas teapot, and because it was a Texas shape, people bought them. And then the iconography of the prickly pear cactus is an easy decorative thing to reproduce. I use that a lot. I use the Saguaro Cactus. And I don't know whether most people know it or not, but the only place a saguaro grows is in Arizona. But to me, it represented the Southwest, so I put saguaros on there because, again, the prickly pear is low, and the saguaro gave it the decoration height. The base, I had to do the base. And then each of the cloud parts are a separate, like a sphere, sort of smashed. So I had to make a variety of those. Again, it's functional because the lid lifts off. I don't know whether it's obvious that it's a lid. So this is airbrushed with Easy Stroke, which is a underglaze. Well, I started using it without putting glaze on it. I mean, this is no big discovery or anything, but that's what I did, and therefore it has the matte finish because it's not glazed. And then the contrast then between the highly glossed base, which is against the blue, against the matte, just makes the matte look more matte, and probably the shiny look more shiny. I always had a patron, which I never realized. Richard Colley, then the Caffey brothers, then Martha Clare and Guy both took it over and had the Karankawa Gallery. I was provided a studio. I finally had to pay for my own materials, but they paid the utilities. They paid. It's just amazing what I've fallen into. I never had a goal of being what I am. It just all happened. And it was all so fortuitous, and it always allowed me to work. And that's what these people did for me. A lot of people want, they want us such and such to commemorate something. So I ask them, I get as much of what they want and write it down. They'll say, I say, what kind of a design? Well, you decide. I say, no, it's not for me, it's for you. What do you like? So I get as much information from them as to what they think they want, and then it's up to me to solve the problem of satisfying what they want within my realm. Sometimes they'll say, well, can I have a sketch? And I'll say, no, you can't have a sketch because it'll take me as long to make the sketch and it won't look the same anyway. I'll make the piece. If you don't like it, you don't have to buy it. And so then having these restrictions sets up a problem. And because the math background, you solve a problem. And that's what I'm doing. And I spend, in the mornings waking up, I do the Sudoku, I do the crossword, I do the word jumble, which are all puzzles, solve the problem. And one of my favorite pieces, other than McNamara's retirement, is the Czar's cookie jar, because for some reason, to me, it's almost, there's something about it that's perfect. And fortunately, you all get it. And so I made these pieces that I made fake jewels and I made fake bezels and then added beads, and they became very, very Baroque and decorative. And also included was a series of monster icons, which were from a Russian book I bought that were sort of, I don't know if you know Russian iconography, they're very flat, and that was the inspiration for those. And they're also, well, I guess they aren't as decorated as the ones I made. In fact, Mel Klein has the most basic ones, but they're really nice. Raku is, again, a traditional Japanese process where you fire the piece, you take it out of the kiln when it's red hot, you put it in a container of combustible material, you shut off the oxygen again, it reduces the piece, it turns any exposed clay to a dark charcoal color, it affects the glazes, and it's part of the Japanese tradition, and because of the process, you have a lot of things happening that you don't plan on. It's like acts of God. Like the trash will affect the glaze and scar the glaze. And so when they would take it out, they would, contemplate it and look at how God had, became and it was a very intimate thing. And unfortunately, American potters discovered raku and have sort of desecrated the whole idea of what the Japanese. And so I used to do raku parties to entertain the socialites. They would hire me to go to their debutante party and do a raku party, and I'd make little tea bowls for everyone, and they would decorate it, and I would fire it, and they would all go home with their own piece, because you could, make it and fire it in an hour, whereas in a regular kiln it takes 10 or 12 hours. And we did that once at the gallery, and someone, for whatever reason, tried to flush their tea bowl down the toilet, and I got jammed in the toilet, and I had to buy a new toilet. Ben's approach is, because he was a director, he's very good at arranging, setting the scene, and when he has an opening, the build-up to the opening, the setting the scene, creating the space, designing the invitation, getting the art, building up and having the opening. I think he always said that in a play, once the opening show, he was no longer interested because it was over. The build-up was what was important. And I think that's the way he approaches his gallery, is creating an environment for the art. He's very good placing things visually. I never really understood what a gallerist does and how important they are to a creative person. And he's very literate. He's smart. He knows how to spell, which I don't know. A lot of the pieces have literary references. Like went through the list you gave me, and there's one entitled Old Man's Visions, Young Man's Dreams. And so I was asking last night, what does that mean? And it's a quote from the Bible. And he was a theology major or something at one time in his career. So he has a lot of biblical references, literary references. He knows words. I learned 2 words from him, plethora and dearth, which are
What is dearth?
the opposite of plethora. Dearth is dearth. Plethora is a lot. Dearth is not a lot. Anyway.